The last year or so has indicated the emergence of a new hierarchy in men's tennis, as Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal finally matched and went past Roger Federer's Grand Slam tally respectively. But in all this talk of statistics, we reduce the matter of greatness to numbers only, and that's unfair. As a tribute to who we believe is the greatest, here are some moments when Roger Federer was just being Roger Federer. Starting off with tweener versus Djokovic. It was 2009, final slam of the year, a time when Djokovic was considered just another challenger to the domination of Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. But it was pretty obvious that he was getting better and better just as Federer's stranglehold on tennis began to fade. Djokovic put up a brave fight in the semi-final of the US Open, only to fall in 3 straight sets to Federer. 7-6, 7-5, 7-5 is probably the worst way of losing a match, but what happened in the final game of the final set was very Federer-esque. Djokovic was serving to stay in the match, and he found himself 0-30 with Federer 2 points away from a place in the final. A decent serve from the Serb was replaced by a deep return from Federer as Djokovic smashed the perfect forehand to gain ascendancy in the point. Federer's return had him hanging by a thread as Djokovic produced a decent drop shot before lobbing Federer. At that moment, Djokovic felt in control completely. Suddenly, though, disaster. With Federer's back turned to Djokovic, he only had one option, and that was producing a tweener. So he attempted exactly that. Well, that's disrespectful. He actually produced the perfect tweener, which came off as a brilliant passing shot, and it ended up being one of the greatest shots ever played as Federer went on to win the match in epic fashion. Next, we have a coming-of-age win versus Sampras. Before Federer was considered the king of Wimbledon, a certain Pete Sampras had that very honor, and the two met as well in Wimbledon. The year was 2001, and Federer finally got his dream fixture as he came up against the world's greatest player of the time, Pete Sampras. Pete was regarded as the best player at that time, and he knew he'd be facing a talented youngster in Federer, but he had no idea just how talented this youngster was. The match was truly the changing of the guard. Federer started really well as he closed out the first set in a nervy tiebreak, and that's probably when Pete would have realized that he needs to step it up. The OG serve and volley was brought to perfection as he took the second set, but Federer just won't go away. The Swiss maestro won the third set 6-4, and was one away from probably the greatest moment of his career. Sampras once again produced some quality tennis and attacked Federer's developing backhand to win the fourth set and force a decider. Most people would have bet on Sampras to prevail after that fourth set showing, but this was just Roger Federer being Roger Federer. He stringed together his very own style of serve and volley as Sampras was given a taste of his own medicine. Federer won the match 7-6, 5-7, 6-4, 6-7, 7-5, and truly announced himself to the tennis world. And now for breaking Djokovic's 43-win streak. It happens very rarely that Roger Federer plays a tennis match and is considered to be the underdog. Even in the finals and semi-finals that he lost to Nadal and Roland Garros, there were a huge majority of people who had him as the favorite given the ranking and the number of Grand Slams. But in 2011, Federer was truly the underdog as he faced Djokovic, who was on a 43-win streak and would go out to win 3 of the 4 Grand Slams that year. He had beaten Nadal, the king of clay, in the clay court season twice, and was considered a very close favorite to winning the RG when he faced Federer in the semi-final. It was the time when people had written Federer off, and the beginning of Djokovic's dominance meant that he simply wasn't considered the best player in the world anymore. Plus, optics made the fixture an even more difficult one for the Swiss, because he wasn't considered a top-quality clay courter, but as always, Federer replied in a very Federer way. He would go on to produce a performance so dominant that Djokovic had no reply. Federer romped to a 7-6, 6-3, 3-6, 7-6 win in one of the greatest RG performances of all time. Of course, there was the Wimbledon triumph without dropping a set. Winning Wimbledon is probably the toughest thing to do in tennis. Yes, people can make a case about Roland Garros being more difficult, but the grass season is very short, and that's why winning Wimbledon is so much tougher. For Federer, though, it's been a piece of cake as he's collected 8 Wimbledon titles, more than anyone in history. But in 2017, he did something outrageous even by his own standards. Age 36, the maestro didn't drop a single set as he cruised to his 8th Wimbledon title, defeating some of the biggest names in modern tennis: Marin Cilic, Grigor Dimitrov, Thomas Berdych, and Milos Raonic. This feat has been achieved by many players, with Federer himself doing it once in the Australian Open and Nadal doing it a couple of times in Roland Garros. But no one had done it on the grass of Wimbledon, not in the Open era. But once again, that was just Federer being Federer. And now we have winning the Australian Open 2017. Why does this specific Australian Open triumph rank as an achievement for for Federer, because he was returning from a massive injury and no one had given him a chance of even making the quarters, let alone the finals. He was the 17th seed, meaning he'd have a much tougher route to a final, but come on, he can't win it, can he? It was the performance of a lifetime from the GOAT. He defeated Berdych, Nishikori, Zverev, and fellow countryman Stan Wawrinka on his way to the final. Oh, and as if the final would get any easier, he was facing his biggest rival, Rafael Nadal, and while not many people would have bet on FedEx to win, he had different ideas. Once again, beating the doubts of people and battling the old age arguments. Federer redefined tennis in a way no one has ever done and no one ever will. He defeated Nadal over 5 sets and recorded one of the most impressive achievements in the history of our beautiful sport. One thing's for sure, you can never write off this man. Up next was his 5th consecutive Wimbledon title. Roger Federer's dominance of tennis in the 2000s will always remain unmatched. Some would argue that Djokovic had a better peak, but we all know his dominance came in the weak era with an old Federer, and an injured Rafa, and a next gen that's still considered to be next. Federer dominated the sport when it had genuine champions, and he absolutely obliterated the competition, but nothing will ever come close to his achievement of winning 5 Wimbledon titles in a row. It became a joke. He won his first one in 2003 as a long-haired youngster, a sight that seems to be almost 4 decades old. By the time he had won his 5th Wimby in a row, he had transformed into the elegant man we're very much familiar with today. It would be the safest bet in the history of tennis, Federer to win Wimbledon, as easy as it comes. Only Nadal's outrageous achievements in the French Open are bigger and better than this domination from Federer. The maestro wouldn't only be winning the matches, he would be leaving the crowd stunned with his shots that didn't belong in this world. But to us, looking back, it's just a simple case of Roger Federer being Roger Federer. And finally, Roddick can't catch a break, literally. Andy Roddick must hate the sight of Federer, and he has every reason to. The big server from the US is lucky that he at least won 1 Grand Slam before Federer's domination began. The American would reach 4 more Grand Slam finals only to face and lose to the same man, Federer, in all 4 of them. But in Wimbledon 2009, he had the perfect plan and the perfect execution. Sure, Federer is fantastic, but he can't break me, can he? Nope, and he's not as good a server as I am. That means I can get at least a couple of breaks if I don't get broken. Perfect plan, flawless, and the execution? Even better. Roddick came with a vengeance. He didn't get broken at any point in the first 4 sets, losing 2 on tiebreaks. Federer was matching the perfection but had been broken twice in the game, yet somehow clung on to force a decider in circumstances that cannot be explained. You can't beat someone who doesn't get broken, not in Wimbledon, not back then when you had to break the opponent, in the decider to win because there was no tiebreak. Now, everyone's money was obviously on Roddick because he was serving big, but they forgot that Roger Federer can just be Roger Federer, and that's usually enough. He clung on until the 30th game of the set, which is crazy by the way. He finally broke Roddick's serve and his heart, and another American lost his record as Federer became the outright leader in Grand Slams. That's a wrap for this video. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.